Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Something crashed on Foster's Ranch in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. Eyewitnesses and UFO researchers insist that what followed was a U.S. military-led recovery of an extraterrestrial spacecraft, including alien pilots. The U.S. military insists that what was actually recovered was debris from a top-secret experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon. For some conspiracy-minded, the UFO incident at Roswell is ground zero for the UFO truth embargo perpetrated by the government, the military, intelligence groups, and private corporations benefiting from back-engineered alien technology. Tonight, The Conspiracy Show investigates the Roswell UFO incident. We'll hear from several top Roswell investigators who'll present their best evidence that the military did in fact cover up the crash and recovery of an alien spacecraft and the extraterrestrial victims of that crash. And finally, a former U.S. Air Force pilot and astronomer who says the phenomenon known as the Roswell UFO incident is much to do about nothing. Me, I'm like you. I just want the truth. And I'm willing to follow the truth wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human-alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. Is it possible technology can alter weather patterns created by the make it has been engineered by the Illuminati?
There's no doubt.
I'm here just outside Phoenix, Arizona with Don Schmidt, a co-author of 3 books on Roswell, including Witness to Roswell, uncovering the government's biggest cover-up. Don, thanks for joining me.
Richard, pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
There are so many varying accounts of what happened, when it happened, who saw it happen. Can you help sort that out by giving me a very brief timeline, which includes dates, locations, and the principal figures involved?
I need to initially point out that most of the contradictions come from the researchers, the investigators involved. They don't come from the witnesses. The eyewitnesses who saw something come down through the severe lightning storm the late evening of July 3rd, seeing what appeared to be a flaming orb of light arcing downward as far as in the outlying desert region. And then the rancher himself, Mac Brazel, discovering the debris field the very next morning.
Explain what Mac Brazel actually found on Foster's Ranch.
Well, it's quite clear that Max found debris and bodies. He actually used expletives to explain the fact that, damn it all, they're not human. He did find something of an extraterrestrial nature, and he made it very clear to anybody that he spoke to after that, until the threats came forward and shut him down, that it was in fact an extraterrestrial craft.
We know that rancher Mac Brazel heard an explosive sound. He's out in the middle of nowhere, you understand. He lives out in the boonies, no electricity, no radio, no newspaper, no telephone, so he can't call somebody and say, hey, you won't believe what I found, kind of thing. So he's telling the guys at the store.
There were pieces being passed around of the wreckage because nobody could identify the unusual characteristics of this strange material that the rancher had discovered just that very morning.
That's when he hears about flying saucers, and he also hears that there's a reward available for pieces of one. Recover a flying saucer, a couple $1,000, which is a lot of money then. Everybody says you ought to go in to Roswell, to the sheriff's office. Maybe you can catch your reward.
He arrives at the Chavez County Sheriff, George Wilcox, and there too, neither the sheriff or his deputies can identify this material. And the sheriff then in turn contacts and actually speaks with Major Jesse Marcel. This is all on Sunday, July 6th.
Okay, let's go to the press release. Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Office releases this press release. Give me the details, the content of that press release.
It doesn't name the rancher. It doesn't say where this has happened. It just says north of Roswell, but it states specifically that they have recovered it. They have it in their possession. When in reality, there's a debris field of 3/4 of a mile long, hundreds of feet wide, still out there.
I think you'd have to question why an alien spacecraft would be made out of mylar paper. I wouldn't want to travel anywhere in that.
Stanton, I want to get a sense of what was happening in Roswell, the kind of pressure that was being applied to the citizenry. Even Mac Brazel, in his July 9th, 1947 story with the Roswell Daily Record, completely flipped and changed his story and was talking about a weather balloon. What happened to Mac Brazel? Who got to him?
We know that Mac led Jesse Marcel and Cabot out to the ranch on Sunday, the 6th. So they came back late on the 7th. At the end of the article on the July 9th paper, the rancher says, if there's one thing I'm certain of, I know it was not a balloon. If I ever find another one, I'm not going to report it either. The military went and got Mac.
They've nabbed the rancher. They've grabbed Mac Brazel, and they're holding him incommunicado at the same time. So you have all this going down.
Mac Brazel was kept at the base for a few days.
They would keep him at the base for about 5 days, even after the weather balloon explanation comes out.
Now suddenly it was recovered on June 14th. And he said it was just a bundle of sticks and other stuff. So he lied. And also it appears that, from comments many people have made, that he suddenly came into a little money.
Roswell, New Mexico. This case has captured the imagination of the public for many years. Why is it that this story just won't die?
Well, of course, it wasn't a story for almost 31 years where none of the UFO believers and UFOlogy even paid any attention to it.
The intelligence officer from the 509 bomb group would be Jesse Marcel.
Yes.
According to his account, when he went out to the debris field and picked up pieces of this material and he crumpled it in his hand and it seemed to have some special properties, I would assume that an intelligence officer from the 509 would be a trained observer. How could he have been so mistaken?
Well, first off, he wasn't a trained observer. That's the first thing. The second thing is he probably was handling material he'd never seen before.
He had found balloons. And that's something you have to understand. Weather balloons were common. Jesse Marcel had worked with them. The notion that he wouldn't recognize a weather balloon is absurd.
I think you'd have to question why an alien spacecraft would be made out of mylar paper, balsa wood sticks, and neoprene rubber. I wouldn't want to travel anywhere in that. But that's what he picked up.
What struck him was that there was nothing conventional there. He's seen plane crashes. And you know, you got propellers, you got wires, you got vacuum tubes back then, you got little things that say made in Oshkosh valves. If he'd served in the Pacific, you know what airplanes looked like.
And Blanchard, the base commander, you know, he goes up the chain of command, calls his boss, General Roger Ramey. Well, he immediately contacts the Pentagon. And General Clements McMullen turns right around and calls up Ramey's chief of staff, Colonel Thomas DuBose, and orders him to have that material from Roswell sent directly to their attention at the Pentagon.
If it was just a weather balloon, why would that attract the attention of General Roger Ramey? Why were all of these military types so interested and involved in this crime?
Well, Ramey wasn't interested in this until they put out a press release on the front page of the paper and it became national news. Then I dare say he was not pleased when he found out. And in some way, we have sort of a public relations debacle where somebody says this is something that it's not. That's why he ordered a new press release be released saying this turned out not to be a flying disc at all. And that's why this second press release got turned out. Everything else is a story. There's no evidence support it. There's no corroborating evidence to support it. There's no Air Force documents to support it. Nothing.
It's the only case that has two big fat reports about it. The Roswell report, Truth versus Fiction in the New Mexico desert. The Air Force unfortunately provided the fiction. They said that was their last word on the subject. Short time later, second volume, the Roswell report, case closed. The crazy thing is the New York Times put it on the front page, explanation. So he sees the nurse the next day, and she tells him that she had been asked to help out in a, I don't know if it's a dissection or an autopsy, who knows. And she described to him what the bodies looked like.
You've interviewed over 500 people
Yes.
in your research, 2,000 interviews. Talk to me about some of the most compelling eyewitness testimony that we haven't discussed thus far.
One of the surviving witnesses to the bodies, he talked to us. It took us months to finally get him to talk, telling us about the bodies. And the tears are streaming down his face.
I did talk to a cameraman who was flown from Washington out there to the base, and his job was to take pictures. They had a tent, and there were bodies inside. And they'd open the tent, he'd take a picture, pull out the plate, hand it to the guy, kept doing this.
Tell me about the man who ran the mortuary in Roswell, Glenn Dennis.
We have multiple witnesses, even down to a nurse, who said that she placed the order for the caskets to come in. So there was a request for child-sized caskets.
He gets a call, there's a lot of activity going on. Goes inside, sees a nurse that he knows.
Who quickly warned him to get off the base immediately, that something big had happened, and that he was then physically accosted by a red-haired captain and a black sergeant who threatened him, warned him that if he didn't get off the base immediately and keep quiet as to what he had even suspected or heard, that they'd be digging his bones out of the sand, as the one said to him.
So he sees the nurse the next day, and she tells him that she had been asked to help out in a, I don't know if it was a dissection or an autopsy, who knows. And she described to him what the bodies looked like. There was a sketch done. And the length of the upper arm was greater than the lower arm, which is different from what it is for us. And 4 fingers. It smelled to high heaven.
What are your thoughts on Glenn Dennis?
I think all of these are just stories. There's no corroborating evidence to any of this. But when you start talking about anything other than the debris, Phil, the raw wind target and the weather balloon, there's no evidence to indicate any of that's true.
And when he went back to talk to her again in a few days, she was gone. Shipped out, supposedly to England, and supposedly there'd been an airplane crash and she was killed.
Well, I think what happened was the amount of attention that was paid to that debris. Hundreds of soldiers coming in, scouring his land, the land on the Foster Ranch, and all of the events surrounding that quite clearly proved that the United States Air Force brought into play individuals, officers, to come into the community to lay down threats among the community that this information should not be spoken about.
It's total confabulation, it's total people making up stories.
There is another witness. Tell me about the former lieutenant governor.
He was lieutenant governor at that time, senator. He became Senator Joseph Montoya. He had close friends in Roswell that were part of his campaign. Montoya just happened to be at the base at the time. You know, it shocked him. It upset him. In fact, he even, described how one of them was alive, that he could hear it moaning and that its knee was rocking back and forth.
There was a number of projects where they were testing, what would happen if you ejected at high altitude and so forth. And they were dropping these dummies. They were about 6 feet tall. And they'd go out with these trucks with cranes on them because these dummies were very heavy. This equipment was and they'd put them on stretchers to carry them around. And they really did this. We got photographs of all this.
Get me out of here. Get me the hell out of here right away. Don't take me to the motel. You know, just take me back to one of your houses. I need a drink. I need something right away. And he finally blurted out, you won't believe it. You won't believe it. They weren't human. The ones most apt to talk because they don't have pensions at stake. They're the ones that are now on their deathbeds. They're all talking about the little men, and as one of the officers said, they sure weren't from Texas.
Don, it's alleged that Chavez County Sheriff George Wilcox had the unenviable task of going to some of the locals.
Yes.
And threatening.
Yes, yes.
Is there any truth to that?
Yes, there is. We believe it's the exact reason that he did not run for re-election. He was used to, visit all the civilians locally within Roswell to re-emphasize those very threats, that it was out of his hands, he couldn't protect them, and that the military informed him that if they didn't cooperate, if they didn't keep their mouths shut about the true nature of the incident, that they even risk death.
The Air Force, under its official status, would have never done such a thing, would have never told anybody or threatened anybody. It's against the Constitution. It's against the Constitution for a sheriff to threaten anybody. Now, did he feel intimidated and perhaps go out and do something? I can't say, I don't know. What I'm saying is if anybody in the Air Force ordered him to do that, that would have been a court-martial offense. If he had gone out and threatened anything, it'd be a violation of state law and federal law.
Barbara Duggar was the sheriff's granddaughter. She was staying with her grandmother, the sheriff's wife. The sheriff was dead. And the grandmother says, Barbara, I guess I never told you why your grandfather didn't run for sheriff. It was an elected position, didn't rerun for sheriff. She said when that crash happened, the government came to him and said, if you ever talk about what you saw, we will kill you and we will kill your family. And the granddaughter's horrified. Did you believe them? Barbara, I was there. I believed them. Now, these are not the kind of people who are making up stories for popular consumption. There's no point in it at all. But there were threats. I found another guy who was in the medical unit and apparently helped stuff bodies in body bags at another crash. And he said what got to him was not that they told him to shut up. He could understand that. But that they threatened his family. If you ever talk, we'll get you and we'll get your family. And he thought that was going a bit far, But this was not uncommon, is what I'm saying.
Well, certainly, as we described running this race with The Undertaker, the attrition rate of the World War II generation only intensifying day to day. And we're running out of time. But the ones most apt to talk because they don't have pensions at stake. They're the ones that are now on their deathbeds. They're all talking about ship, the unusual material, about the little men, and as one of the officers said, they sure weren't from Texas.
What crashed in the New Mexican desert in July of 1947? And what did the military recover from the debris field? Was it a vehicle of extraterrestrial origin and alien corpses, or an experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon?
Project Mogul was a top-secret classified program to see if they could detect sonic waves for nuclear explosions by the Russians. It turns out that one of these they lost, and what more than likely happened, it came down, the wind tore it all to pieces, and all the pieces of the balloons and these radar targets got scattered by the wind all over the place, and it probably looked very impressive, but it was mylar pregnated paper, balsa wood, and the neoprene rubber from the weather balloons.
Is it possible that the U.S. military accidentally told the truth in the first press release and then quickly changed their story and pulled off one of the greatest cover-ups in modern history?
Why bring in hundreds of soldiers to scour the Foster Ranch, to walk arm in arm, to pick up little pieces of everything? Why have riflemen sitting on top of the mesas? Why bring in bombers to put bodies in crates? Why do all of these things have to come about just because the United States Air Force is trying to cover up a weather balloon? It just doesn't make any sense.
Why would an intelligence officer from the Roswell Army Airfield, who helped gather up the bits and pieces from the crash site, swear it was nothing made on this earth? Why do family members of the former sheriff of Chaves County swear he was forced to threaten residents to keep quiet about what they saw? Why are elderly witnesses to the Roswell incident, including retired military personnel, coming forward as they near the end of their lives and telling investigators it was a UFO? There were alien bodies. There was a cover-up. Why? Over what? A weather balloon? Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.